Hello. All right. I'm here. Jeff's here.
Here I
Awesome.
am.
Yeah, and we've got a special guest today too, and we'll get to that in just a moment. What are we talking about today, Jeff? What's the topic in particular?
Well, the overall topic is advertising, but it's like, where do you advertise? And who are you advertising to?
That's right. Right audience, wrong place, or vice versa, wrong place, right audience, or heaven forbid, wrong audience, wrong place. Hey, we've all seen that happen. And I'm sure some of you have gone, why aren't my ads working? What the F? That's the thing. We're going to get straight into it here in a moment. Your ad isn't failing because your copy sucks. It's failing because you're probably putting it in the wrong place. And you don't want to be doing that because it basically just burns through all of your ad budget. So we're going to bring in our guest today. Our special guest is Sean Wachsman. He's the guy. He's the founder, if you will, the president, the commandante of Liminal brands. He's the guy the CPG brands call when they're done playing dress up and are ready to scale. Yeah. And he's been deep in the trenches. He's been helping build brands and strategy and messaging and media plans that get businesses from $0 to $35 million. And then, of course, scaling them up to, let's say, $100 million without torching the budget. So without further ado, which is, as they say, French for adieu. Hello, Sean.
Hello. What's going on,
How are
guys?
you?
Hey,
Good to see you, man. Good to
You
see
too.
you. Absolutely. So we've got quite a thing to get into today here. So we'll just get right to it. Why does this topic matter to anyone in particular? If you've got a great brand, right, and you've got the best creative team in the world, and your mission is sound, you actually care about people, but your ad shows up where your customers are not. It's not where they're at. They're not fishing. You fish where the fish are. And if you're not doing that, you're tossing your ad budget into the wood chipper. As I said earlier, advertising to Gen Z on your local cable news station is like trying to use a Phillips head to put out a forest fire. It's a technical tool, but it's useless when you're dealing with a forest fire. So without any further, Sean, let's talk about your experience and how you have seen this go right, perhaps, and how you've seen this go wrong. And then we'll move on to sort of the areas where audiences really do hang out.
Yeah, no, one, appreciate you having me on. Two, you mentioned the Gen Z and I think, would you say TV? Back in the day, it was all about, watching public access and what kind of goofy shows they had on there. But yeah, I think brands, the idea is you want to build a business and build a brand and you connect with the consumer or your consumer, and you've only got a finite amount of dollars. So
Right.
obviously, how do you find those people? And I've seen it go right a lot of times in my experiences, and I've seen it go wrong. One of my experiences of leading a brand was Chambord liqueur or bottle you might see on every back bar.
Yeah.
And when I moved on to the brand, dollars were being spent in the wrong places because it was also the wrong consumer. So we had to revamp the consumer and get consumer alignment between Chambord and really who is that person we're trying to target and reach. And then we started spending in those right places. Very female oriented lifestyle. It was right as influencers and YouTube stars were starting to become part of the marketing mix. And as that alignment came and those dollars were spent, the brand started growing again because we were present where our consumer was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's the key, Jeff, on your end. I mean, and especially either, in our experience, currently as Brand Artica or in any other experience you've had previously, have you seen that go horribly wrong or horribly right or terribly right?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of both, I would say. Certainly, there's times where it's spot on. I worked for a brand that was like, specifically for a luxury consumer, and I think so. The right places for those products to show up
Hmm.
were the things like Rob Report and things like that, because they, that's where the kind of affluent buyers were.
Hmm.
But also I've seen, where we had products that just didn't really, it didn't attract the right audience because it wasn't lifestyle enough, right? So it was more for a hobbyist, and it just landed flat because people didn't connect with it in a lifestyle type of way.
Okay. Um, I know we recently had that experience too with a client that was, advertising. I think they were out in the Midwest somewhere, but it's irrelevant who they were or what they were doing. But it was just kind of a misguided attempt at, you know, uh, spending money to create a television ad when their brand really is who they were trying to reach. To be honest, is more of a streaming generation. And the way I looked at it and unsuccessfully explained it was that, that older audience that is still watching, the local TV news station, if you will, they don't need to know this message. They're not going to catch it anyways. That audience is not, they're older. They're not who you're looking for. You already have them, and you're creating what, traditionally would be a TV ad, which could very simply turn itself over to being a streaming ad with and I don't know, Sean, about whether you have experience in this. I have some experience in, when you go through Hulu or you go through the Netflix or whatever, there's a certain amount of hoops to jump through, but like it's essentially the same. You're running a targeted ad at specific times. I mean, you can even dial it down to the program genres that you want to run it in. uh,
Mm.
and what would why would someone not take advantage of that?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. One, so I want to get, it's going to tie back to, I think, something you were just talking about, but if you're going to go to the trouble to create something
Hmm.
and invest money and time, and you're going to go to the trouble to try to, invest in paid media to get it out there and build your brand, you better sure as heck, one, know who your consumer is and where that consumer lives. So I think like that's, you get excited about creating something, getting it out there, and you're excited to see it, but sometimes you forget about, okay, where is that person?
Hmm.
The On the streaming side, OTT and so on. I think the thing to people have to be very careful about is getting too segmented. So one of the most important things that folks need to be thinking about is, yeah, if you're going to fish where the fish are, make sure there are enough fish there. I think also, you try to get so hyper targeted on this very specific maybe consumer persona that you've built, that you've actually shrunk your audience in your media targeting. So one of the most important things you can do is make sure your audience size is big enough. And then the other component is from a time standpoint, when, particularly like a thinking calendar is, when are the most people, when are your consumers shopping your category, and really having the biggest pool possible there. Those
Hmm.
most important times, it's part of those laws of brand of when you're running and those that media and targeting. It is all about when the most people are shopping your category.
Mm.
Okay. And in mentioning the law, um, you know, a lot of people have sort of I think there's some, they're not rules, but they're standard kind of commonsensical things about what audiences and age groups and generation, this, that, and the other thing are on this platform, that platform, that platform. I think there's a certain amount of wiggle room there.
Mhm.
Because I know that in our business, because we're a branding agency or a design creative agency, I spend a lot of time in social media. Um, and, I'm 56. Do I fit the TikTok genre? depending on who you talk to, I suppose. But I spent a lot of time there, so I do know enough about it to be dangerous. And that's the same with anything else. The one thing I can't figure out, I don't know about you guys, is Snapchat. Can't. I don't.
I like the filters.
Yeah.
But
It's
let's talk about let's say Gen Z. What's your rule sort of when you think about Gen Z and millennials? What age groups are we talking about here?
I think about teenagers
Mhm.
into kids just out of college,
Mhm.
essentially.
Okay.
I think of them as the TikTok generation.
That's right. And they live on TikTok. They live
Yeah.
on Instagram, or if you will, Insta. Sorry, kill me later for that. Snapchat. I know my kids are all like, they want to be on Snapchat. My daughter wants to be on Snapchat. And I'm like, dude, this is a weird, dangerous place. It's filled with thorns and weirdo. But she's Dad, my friends and I communicate here.
Mm.
How we talk. And I was like, okay, that's weird. We bought you a $900 phone, but you're using it to talk through that. Okay. But they live on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat. I think in those places, a business that wants to be involved on those platforms has to be good at short form content, right? I think humor is a big part of it. Collaboration, rawness. You can't overproduce on any of those platforms, otherwise your old person is showing. And I think, would you guys say, I think longer form, more polished, the corporate kind of thing is just ignored. It falls into the waste bin.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was gonna say, as you were saying it too, it's a lot of, we talk about where do you advertise, but it's a lot of it too is what, right? So answering the what is the strategy part of it. You can get your targets in terms of where, but it is what you're creating too has to speak to them. And I don't know, and I'm sure we've all run into this where I always have this story about I had to do a brochure, and so asked the sales guys, do you want it for the dealers or do you want it for the consumer? And they're like, yes, I want it for both. But you can't talk to them both the same way. And I think a lot of people think they have a piece of content that they're proud of. They have a video, maybe it's a corporate thing. I don't, whatever it is, they think that they could use that in all different places and with all different targets, and you can't. You can edit it for specific targets and places, but as is, I think that's where the ball drops. Is a lot of it is just repurposed for different platforms, and it doesn't really belong everywhere. It was made for intentionally for a specific use.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to add this in there. I worked at Disney for 15 years, and I started at Disney at a thing called Radio Disney, and it was brand new. And it was it was a radio station all over the country for kids and families, done in the Disney style with the Disney sort of responsibility and value and ethic. And, it was really cool. When I first started, I think they had about 5 songs. 3 of them were Mambo number 5. And the, not kidding.
I bet.
Not kidding. But they didn't really run any ads. And then they started running ads, and there was a lot of, reasoning behind A, Disney does things a certain way, and B, you just you wanted to be appropriate when marketing, especially to a children audience, because they don't have the, they don't have the tools to combat those kind of tricky marketing messages that, they're susceptible, I think, to that. But the funny thing is, to flip the coin, the issue I think that Disney learned really quickly was you can't buy 55 AM radio stations with 5 watts of power and expect kids to sit down and listen to, NSYNC, Britney Spears, Mambo number 5, 10 times, 15 times an hour,
Right.
because it's a shitty signal and because AM radio sucks. It's great for talk radio, but it's not designed for music that's been produced and recorded in stereo, HD sound. So they really, kind of botched that. And that's just something, it goes both ways, right? Now, obviously, Sean, you're a millennial.
No. I have plenty of angst. I'm a Gen Xer. Come on.
Yes.
Me too. Gen Xer with millennial leanings. I'm millennial adjacent.
No, I'm just me, and I'm going to step in here and say that we I'm here in Louisville, Kentucky, and we went to night racing at Churchill Downs, and it was a '90s theme night, and my wife and I walked in, and we've got our flannel and everything. There are all these Gen Zers in high school and in college, all in their pastels, all dressed up for the track. I was like, is there anyone here that's dressed as the '90s? We slowly found our tribe, but full Gen Xer here.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, hey, just as a marketing idea for the racetrack there, they might want to consider night racing in the morning. I'd go to that, as a Gen Xer, I can't stay up too late. So, but millennials, they were on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, TikTok. That's the other thing I wanted to mention here is that I think that, raise your hand if you've heard radio's dead. I don't think it is. I think it's just changed. I think it's just changed its pants.
Yeah.
Certainly, I think there's still and I know that there's times I listen to radio in the car. I don't really listen to it at home, but I do listen to, and she's going to say, what, Peter, what? Because mine has a English accent. Alexa, I'll listen to my music on Alexa. I'll listen to podcasts on Alexa. But, Spotify, Alexa, Pandora, those are places where you can run streaming ads just like you did in the old days. And I am a firm believer in audio messaging being, that sort of theater of the mind can be really effective. It really connects to people across a lot of different genres. Would you guys agree or disagree that radio is dead or has just changed its pants?
No, I look at it as it's not dead. It has a role. We've been talking about this for years when it comes to media, the fragmentation that is just continues to occur. And that's why I think you'll hear radio is dead because there's all these other new things. That's why I think about TV ratings or sports ratings. They're down. They're traditionally down because there are so many channels, so many sports do, all these types of things. So it's just a matter of fragmentation at the end of the day. And radio still belongs in the mix. And I think there's a level of what your media strategy is, as well. So where it does come into the mix.
And then, I guess, again, I'm speaking in generalities, right? I think there's a lot of us that cross over and fluctuate between platforms, depending on whether it's just for personal use or business. The Gen Xers love them some Facebook. We love us some emails, streaming radio, another one, YouTube, there's a messaging content change that occurs where you're looking for more trust building. People, how do you guys feel about reviews? Do you base a lot of your purchases based on the reviews you read?
Some I think there's a level of when I don't really know a lot about a particular sort of area of products that I'm trying to shop for the first time or something. That's when I really start digging into reviews on products, and then just friends telling me I trust my friends tends to be what it is. But reviews definitely, they play a role for me personally in certain situations.
Jeff, I know you were.
Yeah, that's I agree, Sean. Like it's part of the process. It's not the only thing, right? I just bought an air conditioner and I went to Amazon and it had 12,000 4.5-star reviews. And that's a lot. so on an Amazon product. So I immediately became confident. But I'll tell you, if I saw 10 then I would be like, well, there's only 10 reviews on this thing. I have to dig a little deeper here.
Yeah.
Because it's not, there's not enough data there, you know.
Mm.
And so for me, it's just like it's part of the process in terms of reviews. But going back to like where you're, what we're talking about in terms of ads on things like TikTok and things, I think a lot of times a brand almost need that the UGC, they need an influencer to speak for them a lot of times, because I think it depends on the audience that they're trying to hit. And again, we're talking about, how do we target this the best way? For an older brand, maybe, they have a product that really would fit within a specific audience, but they can't do it themselves. It just won't come off.
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
so they get someone else to speak for them. And I think it still works. I don't think it's dead. I think influencer marketing isn't dead. It's just a lot of it is being used in a kind of a different way.
Hmm. Interesting. I am wondering how long influencer marketing is going to uh, uh, be effective. Um, I really do. And I blame the influencer marketing all the way back to like the Real World MTV first season New York. That is when everyone realized, oh my God, I'm special too, and I can be a celebrity.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Where do you guys find yourselves most susceptible to advertising?
For me, it's Instagram. I bought way too many things after getting hit with an Instagram ad of I bought shoes and for some reason I went back and bought another pair of shoes from the same company, and they are the loudest shoes that I think I've ever ordered and uncomfortable. But for some reason, I like the look. Uh, but I've been very susceptible to Instagram, probably more to clothing related advertising versus food and beverage.
Okay.
But yeah.
Jeff, you?
Yeah, I think it's a couple different, like, so it used to I'm not on Facebook much anymore, but it used to be Facebook. I discovered new products there that I think they did a good job in terms of, like, winning me over. But um I'm on Amazon. Amazon has become like a little bit of they have influencers on that too, and I think the way that they present it, it's still within their ecosystem. So I'm watching the videos and I'm like, oh my God, I have to have that thing. But I think, I mean, those are probably paid ads, right? This in some sort of convoluted way. it gets in there that way. But also YouTube. I think
Mm.
YouTube is another one where I see these reviews, I see these like mini ads, and I think a lot of times you're like, wow, I didn't know that this product was available.
Mm.
But I have to say, I do go right when I go on YouTube or these other platforms, I'm right over at Amazon again.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I think for me personally, I've fallen victim to the Instagram ads, especially apparel like you, Sean, whether it be a hat or shoes or, and I feel like I've gotten screwed a bunch of times, and it's frustrating. One thing that I learned personally from that, and this, I go, and this is something for CEOs, founders, marketing directors, anybody in that world that's making decisions. If you don't have some kind of presence on the platform, don't be running ads. Like, get a presence first.
Yeah.
I find that when I find something that I go, wow, that's amazing. I really, really want that custom hat. And then I go looking and they don't exist, or their platform is dusty and unattended, or, then you go to the reviews and people are like, scam, scam, scam. And you're like, fuck, I already sent them my credit card number. So like, you've got to have some kind of presence, I think, on these platforms for the most part to advertise on them well.
Yeah.
The other thing is, now this works to me, local radio and TV, you can still do it, but not if you're going to try to be like the next big snack brand. That's not your home. Now, I will say, I used to do a series of beer ads and beer campaigns for a particular local brewery. And and they ran a whole radio campaign. And I told them, I said, you know what we're not going to do? We're not going to talk about, we're not going to pretend we're sommeliers trying to convince people of this, that, and the other thing. We're going to make these sharp, punchy, and absolutely 150% irreverent, because if we're going to interrupt the flow of music, let's at least give them something to laugh at, think about, and remember. And I think the same thing applies to your Spotify, Pandora streaming audio, even on Hulu, Peacock, YouTube. I think that you've got to make your ad on those channels worth the watch, because otherwise all you're doing is spending a lot of money to give people a chance to go hit the bathroom and grab a snack.
Yeah.
Agree? Disagree?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, think the same thing. That's the break time.
Yeah. It's storytelling. It's the music itself. It all works how it all works together. Or it's irreverent. There's some kind of cut through aspect to it. If you're gonna do it, you've gotta, I think, that emotive component, where does it live within it?
Yeah. So let's talk about a quick gut check. Where should your brand be? I mean, let's talk about brands we know. Okay. If you're open to it, or make up, an Acme Industries Anvil Corporation. Jeff, you want to go first? You want to talk about a brand and where you think they should be? Whether they're there or not is not the issue. Yeah, I know. Putting you on the spot.
Putting me on the spot. Oh my goodness. Well, I think
doesn't have to be our client.
No, I know. Like even if like we just say a category, like a better for you product, food product.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of room for them. I mean, the obvious thing is where they usually those brands start is on social. But in terms of like expanding beyond that, like that's another area where I think these streaming services, I don't think I've ever seen like a food product ad on one of these streaming services. And I don't know whether they're not aware of it or an expense, but I think it's an area where they could play in, especially if they've already kind of established themselves on social and they're already in retail a little bit. So I think it's a good way to kind of just like say, hey, we're here.
I love that, Jeff. I think that's genius, because, again, when you're watching those streaming services, the stomach's rumbling and you're getting a little hungry. And, why not feed the people like your eye candy, right? Your food porn. And maybe they don't have it in their house, but they're certainly going to go to the store next time and go, I'm going to grab that. Right.
Exactly.
How about you, Sean? What's your thought on a product, a category, an industry? Where might they belong or not?
I'll call it the better for you cereal, since I've friends at the Real Cereal Company have brought me back into the category. But I think, that's an interesting category. Thinking about when we were growing up, Saturday morning cartoons, like even like, whoever was doing the shopping, typically it is the female in the household, targeting some of that on TV with those cereal commercials, but I think nowadays I start to think about who is actually buying the better for you cereal. It's going to be, probably a little bit of an older millennial, is my guess, somewhere in that, space. And so, reaching them, it could be through influencers, health-oriented influencers, kind of it's just different than when we were growing up, but health-oriented influencers, whatever those places are they're going for, the health information. And then where's the layer of fun? Some of these cereals are a lot of fun and are trying to evoke that aspect. And so just like trying to think about like, what are those fun spaces that are maybe a little more whimsical from a lifestyle standpoint, that fit naturally in people's lifestyle.
Okay. I would say on the opposite direction, like, let's not do our anti-aging cream on Snapchat or TikTok.
Yeah.
You're wasting your money. unless you're just doing it to be funny and you've got all the money to spend and you don't care. I thought it was interesting to see in the store, so I'm not a big cereal guy, but occasionally I'll have a bowl of cereal that I go, my God, this is so good. Like, why am I not doing this more frequently? But I was in the store, I was getting cereal for the kids, and I always try to buy, whatever trashy cereal they're into, one box, and then a decent box of cereal. But one thing I noticed while I was looking in the decent area was like the Cheerios heart healthy kind of vibe they got going on there. And I thought it was really interesting. What caught my eye was that they had like for dads on the box, front and center. Heart healthy for dads, heart healthy for moms, heart healthy for grandkids, grandparents, because you want to be healthy for the kids. And I thought it was a really smart thing. And it was placed in, the pretty much in the direct eye zone of kids. So for a kid that, was picking up on what they were putting down, they might suggest it. But I thought it was a really interesting play. None of the rest of the package was any different. It was just text on the box that made the difference. And I thought it was a really interesting, tactic. But again, you have to choose your poison by knowing who your target audience is. Do they scroll? Do they not scroll? Where do they shop? How do they spend their time? You got to know these things. And then, can you stretch your budget without snapping it? How do you guys feel about budget stretches?
I was having this conversation with yesterday, and one, there's never enough money. I've worked on one of the most valuable brands in the world, and it never felt like there was ever enough money. So first I'll say that, but I think you do have to consider your budget, but you might want to pick 2 to 3 channels. You might want to pick one channel. If you're an early stage brand, you're not going to have a lot of money. You're going to focus on getting organic going, put a little fuel on the fire when you can, but you might focus on a channel or 2. And then the key is, I think, as you go, is add another channel. Like what else, as you gain budget, if you feel you've maxed out your impact within those channels at the budgets, or you found that sweet spot, when can you add another channel, see how that impacts things overall? So you've got to be conscious with those resources.
Okay. Post and pray, I think, is a strategy a lot of businesses use.
Yes.
It doesn't work that way. You can't Johnny Football, you can't Johnny Manziel your way into the Hall of Fame books. You get into some other books, but not the Hall of Fame, not the one he's looking for.
Right.
We've also talked a lot about organic social media and using that as your A/B test before you advertise. I personally think, and it's funny because some people really fight back on that. And I'm like, I don't understand why you would fight back on that. I don't know if they're afraid that because they put the message out organically, that it won't be as effective when they pay for it, which to me, I go, no, because you're using a targeted audience. You're spreading it in a very, you're not just spreading it out. You're specifically targeting places and regions and cities and age groups.
And your fish need to hear it 7 times to remember.
Yes.
That's it.
So whether you're doing it organically, whether you're doing it paid, no matter what it is, they need to hear your brand at least, 7 times is always kind of the rule. And I think that's what folks need to keep in mind too. We get tired of our message or our thing before the consumer. The consumer does. You're a shopper.
Yep. Yeah, if you're a band and you played 10 shows over the summer and you got booed off stage every time, perhaps your band sucks. Maybe you should practice. And by organic, I mean like, hey, go back to the basement or the barn or the woodshed or wherever you're at, and write new music. Rehearse, get it together, try it out on smaller venues with less people, but you don't go out and play Wembley Stadium when you're getting booed off every stage around town. So I think I
love that. Sorry to jump in. I love the analogy because one of the things we used to talk about on a brand I worked on was act like a band, not a brand.
There.
And think about why do bands become popular? there's a song or two, whatever that starts to catapult them, and people want to hear it over and over and over. That's what the message that's think about from your message, your creative. They want, people have to see it over and over and over to help you grow.
That's really insightful. I love that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, Sean, because that's dead on. I mean, again, you said it before, that like, don't get distracted by multiple platforms, right? And
Well,
don't even focus on the platform, focus on the people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that too, in a band, it is like it's like the conversation you were just saying about the founder. It's like they've seen this over and over again. The band has played that song over and over again. But when people are paying like $100 to go see them in concert 20 years later, they want to hear that song, whether you like it or not. And the thing with founders is that they don't understand, as they expand their reach, all these people have never heard the song. They've never heard their story. And it's so close to them that they're like, let's change it now. Well, they haven't even heard your first story. So yeah. So I think that consistency too, in terms of the impressions, like you said, like, if you're doing ads, if you're doing organic, if you have stuff on your website where people land, or if you have an email that goes out, everything has to be the same message. They have to be uniform.
That's right. That's right. And when something's working, go after it, right? Lean into it. If it works, lean into it, stick with it. And I know that on a lot of the ad campaigns for clients that we've run, we'll start with a certain amount of ads. We'll start with organic content that is exact or similar to, and see how it's received. Does it work? And if it works, great, we can move it on over to an ad. Now, if we go out there and run a campaign of, like, let's just say six different sort of ads, within the first month or two, we know which ones are performing and which ones aren't. Guess what happens to the ones that aren't? They're out. And then what do? Well, now we only have 3 ads. Yeah, but you have 3 ads doing the work of 6.
Right.
It's more cost effective, it's more dialed in, and those are the ones that are working. That also, for an agency like ours, informs us as to what we should do on the next round. How do we behave? I'm always surprised at what performs and what doesn't. I do find that always sort of surprising. I never go into this thinking I already know the answer. But when you learn those things, you pay attention, you take them with you onto the next session. And you do that, and you run it, you see where it goes. Yeah. I mean, I think this has really been interesting. I want to, open it up. Jeff, Sean, anything else you want to talk about here? With regard to what can people do to better find their audience and find their right platform for that audience and for that message. Any quick bits of advice?
I'll jump in and talk about the audience piece. I think, and this probably relates more to the early stage brands, is you probably have a target person in mind, and maybe you've built a persona, hopefully beyond demographics, and you're building psychographics, all that in there. But what you, I think, ultimately need to see is who is actually buying your product, who is connecting to your content, your creative. Who are these people? Because maybe you have that misalignment when it comes to who your audience is. And you may discover, oh, I'm doing, whether you want to change your message, creative, and product, or actually the better thing to do is actually like, oh, this is the audience that I need to be focusing on, and start to make those adjustments. So I think that's probably one of the most important things people can do. And frankly, I think that you always, at every life stage of your brand, always need to be keeping that in mind, is, am I attracting the audience that I should be or want to be attracting, or I think I want to be attracting?
No, that's I was thinking too, like you were talking about the Better For You cereal thing, and I was thinking, I buy Catalina Crunch I've been buying it for, I don't know, 6 years or something. And the funny thing about cereal is that people have different habits with cereal. So as a kid, I would eat cereal in the morning, but as an adult, never. I eat cereal at night. Like it's like an extra snack before I go to bed or something. And my dad used to do that, and my mom used to do that as adults. And so the funny thing is because I've been eating this better for you cereal now for 6 years, my 20-year-old daughter loves it, and she eats it in the morning. She might switch over to the night. I don't know, but it's interesting to see how things play out in terms of. I'm 57 years old. You know, I'm a target for that product, and I can just imagine if I saw a commercial showing someone my age eating a bowl of cereal at night, I would say that's me. You know, and it's not kids eating cereal, you know, at the old hey Mikey, he likes it. You know, it's not that kind of a vibe, right? It's a different vibe. So there's I think there's opportunities for brands to look at the advertising through different lenses and saying, you know, this isn't cookie cutter, right? That the content and the strategy is different depending on who it is that you want to target.
Yeah.
You know, that's great advice. That's great. Fishing where the fish are, use the bait that they actually bite and eat. Stop lighting your ad budget on fire because you've always advertised in these places before, or you did 15 years ago, and why shouldn't you do it now? Yeah, and I was going to say, guys, you know, the three of us, we ought to break open our piggy banks and start a good for you cereal brand. And what I'm thinking is, this is what I'm thinking.
Okay.
It's either branded as night cereal,
Mm,
okay, or morning cereal after dark.
okay.
Or
Oh,
ready for this one? Here we go.
All
We'll
right.
do this maybe. After dark adult cereal. I think if we add adult to anything, it sounds
yeah.
kind of
Yes.
sexy, you know?
Right.
So let's make cereal sexy again. All right. You
I
know,
love that.
I have to say one thing. I cannot believe no one has made the reel motion for fishing where the fish are yet. I don't think I've seen any.
Oh,
you know,
I know.
all right. You know what? Let's just go back to the beginning. Take two.
All right.
Take two. No, I think that's great. I always tell clients, you know, and I use the reference with regards to creativity and creative ideation is that, look, let's cast deep. And if we need to reel it back in, that's fine. But we can't cast into the shallows and expect it to find its way out into the deeper waters. It just doesn't work that way. So yeah, are you a fishing guy, Jeff? I mean, Sean, are you a fishing guy?
No, I actually think I could be. I think I've developed the patience. I used to fish with a line, a hook, and a piece of bologna.
Yes.
What the hell were you
was
fishing
it.
for? Crabs.
There was like a little, there would always be this. I remember going to this tree and there was like I don't know, there was water, I don't know what you would call it, but there would always be fish in there. And I would hold the reel and with bologna on the hook. And once in a while I would catch a fish.
Oh my goodness.
Jeff, are you a fisherman? I don't know.
I used to be in my, you know, in my teens and then probably early 20s. But I remember when I was really little, I didn't want to, you know, touch no little kids want to touch the worm and all that. But eventually I figured that out. But we used to have rolled up white like Wonder Bread, and you you would roll it up into a ball and you put it on the hook. But you know, I used to like fishing. It's funny when the kids were fishing with me, and I was, you know, you have to do the dad thing. You have to put the worm on the hook for them. You have to reel it in because they can't do it because they're little. But after a while, they just really they couldn't do it anymore. They didn't want to do it anymore, and so I ended up not doing it either because it was sort of like, well, if you're not going to fish, I can actually just sit down and relax.
There you go. Yeah, well, I used to fish with paper clips and dental floss and a raisin. All I got was a sunburn. Awesome. I hope anybody that follows up and ends up watching this later on feels the need and free to reach out to Sean at Liminal Brands. He's the founder and super smart guy, super personable guy. We've learned this over the several months that we've been getting to know each other. Please feel free to reach out to Jeff and myself at Brandartica. And this has been a really fun conversation to have with you, Sean. And I hope we get to have some more in the future.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for having me on. A lot
Absolutely.
of fun. Always a fun conversation with you guys.
We appreciate that, man.
Awesome.
I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I'll leave you with this.
Oh my goodness.
It's magic.
Wow. This is a high-tech show.
Yeah. I feel like Job Bluth. All right, guys, let's get out of here.
Adios.
Take care.